Welcome to Parenting Successful Teens, the podcast that cuts through the overwhelm and stress of this phase and offers parents simple, practical, cognitive, science-based strategies for keeping their teens on track. Join Master Coach and real-life mom, Allie Irwin, to talk about real teens, real problems, and the skills it takes to raise successful adults.
When my daughter was little, I was outside and talking to a neighbor, and she was telling me, I can't even remember what the story was about, but my daughter, she came up to me and she kind of tugged on my shirt or maybe leaned against my leg, and I knew she was there and I knew she wanted my attention, but I thought my neighbor was almost done with her story. And, I thought, well, just let her finish up and then we'll go and, see, I could kind of tell my daughter wanted me to come look at something. This was a new neighbor and I wanted to be friends, and it just seemed easier to let her finish up. So she gets to the end of the story and I was like, oh yeah, that was great. And then my neighbor looped back in and told the whole story again. And all the while my daughter was leaning on my leg and trying to get my attention. But my daughter was so polite that she didn't how most little kids will be like, mommy, mommy, mommy. And then you have to address them. You can't continue the conversation. Well, my daughter wasn't like that. And so the neighbor told the whole story again. And this time I was like, okay, yeah, that was great. Thanks for telling me. And something about the way I said it must have made her think I was super interested in this topic, because I swear she told the whole story again. And by then my daughter just wandered away. She was tired of waiting for me. This story seems like it's no big deal, but it haunted me for years, because this story became a symbol of all the ways that I was convinced that my people-pleasing behavior, my hesitancy to interrupt my neighbor, was teaching my kids to be people pleasers themselves. And I made this one story, I promise you right now, I'm sweating a little bit retelling this story because it was so painful for me to think I was so socially anxious and so worried about fitting into my new town and making friends that I was worried that I was teaching my kids to be socially anxious and to put other people's needs ahead of their own. And I made it mean a whole host of things. So years later, when my daughter did have trouble speaking up for herself in school and did have a little bit of trouble with this girl in her class that was kind of bullying her and bossing her around, I blamed myself, and I couldn't stop thinking about that incident in the yard. And this seems really crazy and over the top, and you probably... you're probably what is the big deal? So, your child didn't get your media attention. Kids these days should be more patient. But I want to tell you that most of my clients have a story that sounds like that. Something that happened when their kids were really young that sounds like no big deal to anyone else, but it's come to symbolize the current struggle that they're having with their kids. It's an incident that they look back and they point to and they say, if only this one thing had been different, if only I had acted differently in that situation, we wouldn't be having the problem we're having now. And I think that it's so interesting. I think it's so interesting the way our minds work, because I think part of the reason that we do this as moms is because we've been socially conditioned to believe that we have control over how our kids turn out. That if we parent a certain way, if we do everything right, then our kids will turn out a certain way. If we do all the right things, we'll end up, with the right kids. So when our children are going through something that feels like something we wish that they weren't going through, then we look to ourselves to see what we could do or could have done differently. And I think a piece of that has to do with control. We want to believe that we can control things because then we believe that we can control the thing that's currently happening that we don't like and make it stop. So by looking for a triggering incident, we're looking for that thing that we can control, that thing that we can point to and say, well, if I hadn't done this, this wouldn't be happening. So now that I know what that one thing is that I did, I can change it and my child will stop having this struggle. And in like a teensy way, there is a piece of that that's true. Like if I look back on those situations, I was struggling with some social awkwardness, some social anxiety. And so I was role modeling for my kids all of that social anxiety, all of that people-pleasing behavior. And so it wasn't really that one incident that I'm blaming. It's more like that social anxiety from that incident, like that tendency that I already have, that's what makes that incident so painful. And so in that way, we can look at what that situation brings up for us. In my case, that social anxiety, you can look at what that triggering situation is and understand that the reason it's so painful is because of a belief that you have about yourself. Okay, that triggering incident was an indicator of something about myself that I didn't like. And so I went to work on changing that part of me, that people-pleasing part of me. That's part of why I went through coach training and through all the tools that I've learned and the years and years of coaching that I've had. I've come to understand that I'm responsible for how I think and feel about myself. And so other people's opinions about me, like they don't hold the sway that they once did. I'm so much more socially comfortable. And once I understood that, I was not only helping myself, but I was helping her. Then I had new skills to help her, and I role modeled for both of my kids, being proud of who I was and not needing other people to like me so that I could like myself. And so in a way, that incident ended up being a good thing because the pain of it motivated me to change and to change in ways that I already wanted to change. So in a way, the incident was a good thing because it motivated me to change. The pain of feeling like I didn't handle it well was the motivator to learn how to handle it better. And then once I understood how to handle it better, like I showed her in dozens and dozens and dozens of ways that she was valuable and that her opinion mattered to me and that we have control over what we do in any situation. We can let people talk or we can interrupt them. Or, we can do whatever we need to do in situations. The skills I learned, then I was able to teach her. But I don't want you to walk away thinking that this is a corny, like lemons to lemonade message. Because the process of going from a place where you have a really painful memory to the place where you can almost be happy that the thing happened because it spurred all these positive changes, like that is not an easy leap to make. But it's worth remembering that great quote from Ernest Hemingway about the world breaks everyone. And afterwards, many of us are stronger in the broken places. Okay, not everyone gets stronger when the things that we do or that happen to us, like not everyone gets stronger from those things. But it's worth considering the idea that it's possible. And that the skills that you learn from correcting that mistake or from making up from that thing that happened, like those can become strengths. It's worth doing the work to change those things and to have them become strengths. I say this all the time to my clients when they bring me the terrible things that have happened. I help them see how great it is that those things happened while their child was still at home, while they still had access and leadership and connection as a family so that they could guide their child through those difficult things. We don't want anything bad to happen to our kids. We don't want them ever to get their heart broken or to get disappointed from not making a team or not getting the grades that they want or whatever it is that's disappointing them. But if we can teach them how to grow through those disappointments, then when they're out in the world on their own, they've really learned a valuable skill. And the first place that we can teach them is by growing through our own disappointments. So I want to give you a couple of more ways to think about that shitty thing that you did or that shitty thing that happened that you feel terrible about, in case you're not to the place yet where you can see the good that has come from the bad that happened. So the first, I want to offer you a couple of thoughts. And the first one is, you may just not know the good thing yet. Sometimes the things that we thought were so terrible, later on we talk about them as being a blessing in disguise. And you just may still be at the disguise part of your blessing. Okay? You just might not be to the part yet where you can see that it's a blessing. And you can just hold that thing kind of loosely in your mind, that possibility that the blessing that's going to come from that is still to come. The second idea is the forgiveness that you offer yourself for that thing that you did comes from the same well as the forgiveness that you offer to other people. And in fact, I believe that the forgiveness that we offer ourselves is often the hardest. It's often harder to forgive ourselves than it is to forgive other people. I'm sure you can hear the little break in my voice, because it's certainly that way for me. I'm so much quicker to forgive my kids or my husband than I am to forgive myself. And so the process of learning to forgive myself when I've made a mistake, even over things like being too short with people or not patient enough, that forgiveness expands my capability. Because it's so difficult for me to forgive myself, it expands my capability to forgive everyone. Okay, so the more that I learn to forgive myself, the more forgiveness I have to offer for the people around me. The more I forgive myself, the more I teach my kids that they don't have to be perfect in order to be loved and in order to be loving. Okay, the more I forgive myself, the more I show them that it's okay to be an imperfect human that makes mistakes sometimes, even mistakes that you regret, that you can grow, that you can forgive, and you can love. And if that's the only good that comes out of the bad thing that happened, then that's it. That's the good thing. You just have to accept that and forgive yourself and move on. Okay, and I know that can be a big job. And if you want help processing the thing that happened or processing the thing that's happening right now, I want you to go to my website, allieirwin.com, and go to the Work With Me tab and schedule yourself a free consult. Or I'll also put a link in the show notes. Okay, I want you to schedule time for you and I to talk about what's going on, about what you wish was going on, what's happened, what you wish was happening, and how to get there, how to get what your family needs. And whether we talk or not, I want you to stop beating yourself up about the thing that happened. I want you to show yourself some compassion. I love you. And I want you to love yourself, even when you did things that you wished you hadn't done. Even while you're still regretting all of those things, I love you. All right. Have a wonderful week, everyone.